Hello, everyone. My name is Sarafi, and I'm happy to meet you all. Today, my goal is to go over some of my favorite cards using the template that I've seen going around the net with your favorite types of cards from all over the game. I thought that you guys might enjoy getting to know me a little bit better as opposed to me talking about things that were just generically good or generically powerful. So, let's talk about it. So, the first in the template is your favorite normal monster. And my favorite normal monster is chosen by the World Chalice. Inspired by the world hero legends he heard as a boy, this crusader adds a piece to his armor for every mechstrosity he destroys. He has set out on a quest from Fairy Lee to recover the 7 world legacies and save their world. So, I've always been a fan of the World Chalice archetype. Not World Legacy overall, but specifically the World Chalice archetype, the very first one that was just a bunch of normal monsters that were really good at link climbing and recycling themselves. And that's part of the reason why I really like Speedroids. You'll see a common trend on this list, which I kind of discovered about myself while I was making it. I really just like decks that recycle from the graveyard. That's kind of my thing. It feels natural to me as a Magic player to constantly move cards from my graveyard back to my hand or to the field, as opposed to constantly searching for the deck or looking to send cards directly from the extra deck to the graveyard. I want to be taking materials that I like, getting them from my deck onto the field, and then using them over and over again. And the World Chalice archetype is particularly good at that. There are 3 normal monsters in the World Chalice archetype. Aurum is the best one. He's just the hero of the story. No reason to pick anyone else. Okay, my favorite main deck effect monster, so this is 100% true, is Speedroid Red Eye Dice. Now, what do I like about Speedroid Red Eye Dice? Well, let's talk about it. So this is a level 1 machine tuner monster with 100 attack and 100 defense. And its effect reads, when this card is normal or special summon, you can target one Speedroid monster you control except Speedroid Red Eye Dice, and declare a level from 1 to 6. It becomes that level until the end of the turn. The card is very flavorful. It's a dice, so it has options between 1 and 6. So it's a card that you can feel like, ooh, I'm a gambler. I'm having fun playing a gambling deck. But it's not a bad gamble card, because there's no actual risk to it. So a lot of the times when you run a card like Fairy Box, for example, there would be times where the Fairy Box literally did nothing. And so even though you felt like, ooh, I'm on the edge, I'm playing like a gambler, like someone in a gang or someone running the mob or something like that. Those sorts of tropes from the Northeast United States. It would just not work out because the consequences of failing a dice roll or a coin flip in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are so incredibly high, where oftentimes the card literally does absolutely nothing if you fail to get the high roll, it puts you off. With this card, there's nothing like that. You get all the flavor, you get all the niceness of having a dice type card, but none of the risk. And the effect is not a hard once per turn, it's not a soft once per turn, it's literally just every time you summon this card. And Speedroids are really good at resummoning this card. So you have Take Tomboard to bring it out, you have Court Shooter to revive it, you have other cards that you can use like Speed Recovery to revive this card over and over and over again, and each time it does something different. Maybe it makes a monster level 3, maybe it makes a monster level 6, maybe it makes a monster level 1. You can use it for so many different purposes, and all of them are necessary for Speedroids. It feels like a huge combo piece to the deck. It's so flexible, it's so flavorful. This is basically the only tuner monster that you need other than Court Shooter, and I love it. I love everything about it. Now for Ritual Monsters, this one's a little cheating, I'm sorry, but really, Ritual Monsters, the thing about Ritual Monsters is they are so incredibly bad inherently. The Ritual archetype is so bad that all of the modern Ritual cards are literally just the things that differentiate them are how can we compensate for how bad Ritual cards are inherently. Nekroz does it by having the Ritual spells banish themselves from the graveyard to draw you cards, or by tributing monsters from your extra deck. Libromancer, I think their field spell just draws you Ritual spells, I'm pretty sure. Something like that. I've seen someone play Libromancer like once, but I know that they have a lot of card generation. What Borreload Riot Dragon has going for it is Heavy Interlock, and Heavy Interlock is probably the best Ritual spell in the game, by far. What it does is, this card is used to Ritual summon Borreload Riot Dragon. You must also tribute monsters from your hand or field, and or destroy rocket monsters from your hand or face upon the field whose total levels equal 8 or more. The monster special summoned by this effect cannot be destroyed by battle with a monster special summon from the extra deck, and is unaffected by the activated effects of any monster special summon from the extra deck. So, as long as Borreload Riot Dragon is special summoned with Heavy Interlock specifically, it's so incredibly good. The monster itself is fine. We'll get to what Borreload Riot Dragon does in a second. But Heavy Interlock is such a good card because you get to destroy the rockets. And by destroying the rockets, that triggers their end phase effect. So now you get to replace them with 2 more rockets. One of them is probably going to be Rocket Tracer, so you get some interruption. You get your cards back on the field. You get to thin your deck, put resources in your graveyard, and you get this big boss monster that can't be destroyed by battle with the monster special from the extra deck, and is unaffected by the activated effects of any monster special summon from the extra deck, which is the best protection ever for just monsters special summon from the extra deck, but still, that's going to be the majority of cards that you have to worry about. And on top of that, what does Borreload Riot itself do? When your opponent would special summon a monster, as a quick effect, you can negate the special summon, and if you do, destroy that monster, then destroy this card or one rocket monster you control. So you need monsters on the field to use Riot Dragon's effect to negate special summons, and Heavy Interlock provides those to you. If this card is in your graveyard, you can target one Boral or Rocket monster in your graveyard, destroy one card you control or in your hand, and if you do, add that target to your hand. You can only use each effect of Borreload Riot Dragon once per turn. So it can return extra deck monsters like Borreload X-Charge Dragon, for example, from your graveyard to your hand, or itself. Or it can restore rocket monsters to your hand. And all you have to do is give up a card from your hand. Seems pretty decent. You can pop monsters on the field, then activate the rocket effects in grave. Keep going that way. Giving Boral monsters more effects in the graveyard is a very excellent way to support the rocket archetype. Heavy Interlock, since it mentions Borreload Riot Dragon, can also be used with pre-preparation of rights, which, again, makes it insanely good. I am very eager for these 2 cards to come to Duel Links. When we get these 2 cards, I will definitely be making a Heavy Interlock Borreload Riot Dragon deck, and it will be probably the best version of Rockets, I'm going to be honest with you guys. It's a pretty solid deck. So for Fusion Monsters, this is a no-brainer. Obviously, you guys have seen the thumbnail that I use. You've seen the icon for the channel. I have a very strong affinity for angels, in particular male angels. The entire Dark Lord archetype is a very special archetype to me. I don't like it mechanically all that much, except for the first Dark Lord, because the first Dark Lord is a fusion of 3 monsters, and one of them has to be Dark Lord Morningstar for you to get its effect off. And the Morningstar is, of course, a reference to Samael, the original fallen angel who became Satan in biblical mythology. But you can use any 3 Dark Lords to make the card, and then you get the ability to pay life points to special summon a fairy monster from your hand or graveyard in defense position, which is pretty good. But if it's fusion summoning using Dark Lord Morningstar's material, you can destroy all cards your opponent controls. You might think, okay, so that's pretty good. It's a Black Rose Dragon effect, but you're activating a spell card as opposed to summoning a bunch of cards on the board. You don't have to have any of these pieces on your field. So a fusion monster that pops the board on summon is significantly better than an Xyz, Link, or Synchro monster that would do it, because the cards don't have to be on the field. But it's even better than that, because not only do you not risk your opponent interrupting your play, you can even do it as disruption, because Dark Lords have a trap that allows them to fusion summon on the opponent's turn, Dark Lord Uprising. The first Dark Lord can just come out in the middle of their turn and say, I'm just going to flip the table here, and all your cards are gone. Sorry. So it's a fantastic card. The artwork looks amazing. I really like the animation they did in Master Duel. Definitely my favorite fusion card, 100%. Synchros, obviously, Speedroids is going to be on here. I'm sorry that there are Speedroids on here twice. But High Speedroid Cork Shooter is just the epitome of why I like the Speedroid archetype. I really probably wouldn't be so interested in Speedroids if this card was not in the game. And what High Speedroid Cork Shooter does, it is a level 3 Synchro Tuner monster that is generic. And that is very relevant. The card it walks a very thin line. It's generic, so any deck can make it. But all of its effects are related to being in its own archetype. So it's so specific with its effects that it's not a card that gets poached for being generic, like Constellar Ptolemy M7 does. But at the same time, if someone needs a level 3 Synchro Tuner, this is a card they can make without having to jump through a bunch of Speedroid shenanigans in their deck that's not related to Speedroids. So I do like the fact that it's generic, because it's a Synchro Tuner. Now, when it's Synchro summoned, it has the effect where you can either add a Speedroid spell or trap from your deck to your hand, or if all the materials used for the Synchro summon of this card were Speedroid monsters and they're all in your graveyard, you could special summon them. You cannot special summon monsters that turn you activate either of these effects, except wind monsters. You can only use this effect once per turn. This is where we talk about the red-eyed dice effect. A lot of times what you'll do is you'll use red-eyed dice to change a monster to level 2, make Cork Shooter. Cork Shooter will then bring those 2 cards back, and then you use red-eyed dice again to change the other monster's level to 4 or to whatever level you need it to be, maybe 6. You can either go into High Speed Gorda as a level 5, you can go into Clearwing Synchro Dragon as a level 7, and then make either Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon or Crystal Clearwing Synchro Dragon with High Speed Cork Shooter as your other card. It's a very consistent, very solid strategy, but it's so incredibly flexible because of how red-eyed dice works. And this is why this deck is so much fun. This is why this deck can so consistently build such huge boards with lots of negates. This is why I like the deck. Okay, Lyrilusc Assembled Nightingale. Everyone who was on the Guild of Gurus Discord server saw this one coming. I really like Lyrilusc. They are my second favorite archetype after Speedroids. It's a very fun deck, and I think the reason that I like Lyrilusc so much is because all of the main deck monsters are very bad. So it is a deck that is entirely focused around just swarming the board and then building up the biggest extra deck monster you can. As opposed to other swarm decks like Blackwings and Harpies and Six Samurai, where the main deck monsters could kind of just sit on the board and it didn't matter how you use them. There were some tricks, of course, I'm not saying that Six Samurais are brain dead, but you have to be very careful with how you manage your resources in Lyrilusc. You have to make sure that you can maximize the output of every single monster that you have, especially because there are so few of them. There's only 5 Lyrilusc main deck monsters. A lot of times a card like Assembled Nightingale is not good unless it has at least 5 materials, and let's talk about that. Lyrilusc Assembled Nightingale, 2 or more level 1 monsters. Doesn't have to be Lyrilusc, doesn't have to be Winged Beasts, just level 1s. This card gains 200 attack for each Xyz material attached to it, so 0 attack goes up to 1,000 if you have 5, can obviously go higher than that. This card can attack directly. While this card has Xyz material, it can attack a number of times each battle phase up to the number of Xyz materials attached to it. Once per turn, during either player's turn, you can detach 1 Xyz material from this card. Until the end of the turn, Lyrilusc monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. Also, you take no battle damage. This card is an OTK card with 0 attack points. This is how Lyrilusc wins going second, and it's a real hard thing to do. How do you make this work? How do you make this deck function? Lyrilusc Assembled Nightingale, if she has 5 materials, will deal 5,000 damage because she's got 5 attacks and she's got 1,000 attack. You have to get her up to 7 materials if you want to OTK through 8,000 because she has, at that point, 1,400 attack points and can attack 7 times, which is over 8,000. Now you can raise her attack points in other ways. For example, there are Lyrilusc materials that give an individual Xyz monster 200 attack points if you equip them. You can also use Robina Starling to give Lyrilusc Assembled Nightingale a boost of attack points, like she'll usually give about 600 attack points to a monster you target. And you can use Bird Sanctuary to combine 2 Xyz monsters together and give Assembled Nightingale more materials. It's a fun puzzle piece type deck. Assembled Nightingale is kind of the pinnacle of what the payoff is. There are better cards in the deck than Assembled Nightingale, certainly. But she is, if you're playing a pure Lyrilusc deck, she is the payoff card. She is the reason that you're working towards all this. It's just so satisfying to walk past a powerful monster that has some sort of battle effect or can't be destroyed or has a million attack points and just be like, no, I just have a little bird and she's pissed and she's going right for you. This one's going to be controversial. My favorite pendulum monster is Dreaming Nemorelia. I might be wrong. I do not believe this card has been printed in English yet. And I found that out because I was trying to make this video and I realized that the image that I had, which was a very high quality image, had the wrong spelling of the name on it after I had already saved it and put it in the video. So this is the only card on the list that I have not personally played. I have not played this card. I am so hyped for this. You might think, oh, Serafi, you said earlier that you really like recycling materials. So why don't you like pendulum decks? I would think that being able to summon monsters from the extra deck, basically instead of your graveyard, would be the same thing as what you're describing with Speedroids, right? Well, I am sure that if I played pendulums during Master Rule 3, where you could just pendulum summon every single card from your extra deck that you wanted, that I would have fallen in love with the deck and the archetype. In fact, I'm really glad that I didn't, because when Konami took that sort of thing away from me, I would have felt so betrayed and offended. I would have been so mad. Like, do you realize what you've done to my favorite archetype? But I was not playing at that time. Pendulum decks have too many restrictions on how they can use cards from the extra deck. I'm not really a big fan. It's not that I don't like pendulum decks, but I will tell you, the flavor of this card is just so perfect. And I had to think about this a lot. I thought, do I really want to put a card I've never played in this list? And I thought, yes, absolutely. Because I don't care if this card is good or not, because the flavor is just so amazing. Dreaming Nemorelia is a scale 8, and her monsters in the deck are level 10. So you might think, wow, okay, so what's the other scale? Is the scale like 11? Is it scale 12? No. There is no other scale. There are no other pendulum cards in this archetype. You might think, okay, that's a little weird. Yes. So first of all, that means if you want to pendulum summon in this deck, you have to find a generic scale 11 or scale 12 that does not restrict what type of monsters you can summon. There are very few of those in the game, and even fewer of them that you could reasonably incorporate into this deck. But more importantly, even if you manage to pendulum summon Dreaming Nemorelia's monsters, they're not pendulum monsters. As soon as they die, they're going to go to the graveyard, and you're not going to get to recycle them, so setting your scales up wasn't really worth all that much effort, especially when they can special summon themselves. So this is a pendulum monster for a non-pendulum deck. You might think, what's the point of that? Well, the point of that is, the idea of Dreaming Nemorelia is that while she is on the field, she is awake. And while she is face up in your extra deck, she is asleep. And so you have to put her in the extra deck so that she can start sleeping, which gives you more power and you use up resources underneath her. And then when she wakes up, then she like breaks the entire board for you. It's so good. So what happens is, in order for you to power this deck, you have to banish cards from your extra deck face down to use the effects of your monsters. So you can't use your extra deck because you need the cards in your extra deck to be fuel for your cards. And there's two monsters, they kind of protect themselves and attack based on banishing two cards face down from your extra deck. And then Dreaming Nemorelia has an effect that says she cannot be normal summoned or set, but she must be special summoned from your face-up extra deck by having no cards in your extra deck except her. So you have to banish your entire extra deck face down to summon this card. You can only special summon Dreaming Nemorelia once per turn. If this card is special summoned, you can banish up to one card your opponent controls or in their graveyard face down for every 3 of your face down banished cards, then shuffle your face down banished cards into the deck equal to the number of cards banished by this effect. Okay. So, if you manage to banish your entire extra deck face down, you can summon this card for free from your face up extra deck. And if you do, you take 5 of your opponent's cards without targeting from their field or their graveyard and banish them face down. That is such an amazing effect. That is so incredibly powerful. And it's just such a fantastic idea of this kid being asleep, and the rest of the artwork for the cards. I don't want to show the whole archetype, but they're all like candy monsters, and there's like a tower of chocolate. It's just like a child's fantasy slumber. It's great. It's amazing. And then, of course, you can combine this with cards like Pot of Extravagance and banish 10 cards face down so that you can then special summon her, and then you have 25 cards face down. Just take 8 of your opponent's cards and banish them face down. It's just, this deck is so unique. It's such a beautiful take on what the extra deck could be. And it uses the Pendulum monster just because that is a monster that can be face up on your extra deck. How you get her in the extra deck, by the way, her Pendulum effect says that you can place a continuous spell from her archetype from your deck face up on the field, and if you do, add this card to your extra deck face up. So you can either, there's like a spell card that you can use to put her to sleep from your deck, and if you draw her instead, you just play her, you get her tower, and then you put her in the extra deck. So she never hits the field, she's never destroyed, you are simply putting her to bed. Again, more flavor. Because a lot of times, cards like the Magician Pendulums, when they want to go to your extra deck from the Pendulum Zone, they say, do something, and then destroy this card. They understand. The understanding is very clear. If a card is destroyed in the Pendulum deck, the Pendulum Zone, it is going to the extra deck. But they say just place this card in your extra deck face up. It's very rare. Again, there's no violence here. It's just a sweet, innocent girl having a little nap. And I love it. Link Monster, High Speed Roid, Rubber Band Shooter. So yeah, it's the third Speed Roid card on the list. But this is really the card that like sealed the deal for me. Yeah, I would not have played Speed Roids at all if I did not have access to this card from the start. What High Speed Roid Rubber Band Shooter does is you can banish a level 7 wind monster from your extra deck to search Terror Top and Double Yo-Yo. And then your opponent picks one of them at random. You get the one they pick to your hand, and then the other one goes to the graveyard. So if they pick Terror Top, you get Terror Top, which is what you want. And if they pick Double Yo-Yo, you get Double Yo-Yo and Terror Top goes to your graveyard. You can immediately summon Double Yo-Yo and bring back Terror Top. So either way, you're getting Terror Top, which is exactly what you want. And it's very interesting how the entire modern Speedroid deck is literally just how many 2-card combos can I make to get to Rubber Band Shooter to draw my one of Terror Top. Terror Top is so core to the entire Speedroid strategy that they had to make a Link monster that basically draws it for you to compensate for the fact that it's a one of. And you have two other ways that you can search it. You have Win the Wind Channeler and you have Speedroid Scratch. So there, Speedroids, if you've never seen a Speedroid deck actually play out, it is just dig for Terror Top, get Terror Top on the field, and then synchro summon as much as humanly possible. It genuinely is a deck that feels like it is 100% gas. I hate playing hand traps in Speedroids because I want every single card in my hand to be, I need to continue synchro summoning. I need to build a perfect board. This card is so core to the Speedroid strategy that this list would not be complete without it. I Link summoned this card probably over 2,000 times at this point, and I have won so many games just because of this card. It is fantastic. It has another effect. Its second effect says that you can normal summon an additional wind monster, but if you do, you are locked into synchro summoning for the rest of the turn. So you want to try and avoid this in Master Duel because you want to try and link this into Auroradon after you used its first effect, but sometimes that's unavoidable. Sometimes you do have to normal summon to get the Rubber Band Shooter, and at that point you need the extra normal summon to get Terror Top out, because you can't special summon Terror Top with the summon effect because Rubber Band Shooter's on the field. So sometimes you get Auroradon, sometimes you just get Terror Top, and you're happy with either one. Very, very strong card. Okay, there's one for generic spells and generic traps, and I hate this. But this is probably where I lose a lot of people. Okay, so in terms of just spell cards in general, there are so many different types of spell cards. There are so many different ways you could look at spell cards. And it's hard to narrow down one specific spell card that's actually relevant enough to put on a list like this. But I think I'm pretty confident that that Grasslick Screener qualifies. This card single-handedly enables 60-card decks. The idea of a 60-card deck did not really exist before that Grasslick Screener, and now there are decks that are legitimately just always 60 cards, like Cubics and Skull Servants and Dragon Link. Sometimes that Grasslick Screener gets banned or limited or something like that. Decks make do. People play Reasoning, people play Monster Gates. People will still try and make 60-card decks work because that Grasslick Screener basically taught them how valuable it is to put your entire deck in the graveyard. It's not a healthy card for the game by any stretch, but it is kind of that card that you can look at kind of from afar and just laugh and say, oh, wow, everything's burning down around me. I'm just going to kick back my lawn chair and watch. And I have played Whites and D-Links with that Grasslick Screener as 60-card lists, and it is so much fun. I don't necessarily think the card should exist, but at the same time, it's here now, and it's just, no spell card has brought a smile to my face like this card has. So, definitely my favorite. For traps, I went around, because the problem with traps is, in the real game, you either play traps as floodgates, which are not fun, not interesting, not cool, or you play traps that mitigate the fact that they are traps by being able to be played from the hand, like Evenly Match or Infinite Impermanence, which is it's not in the spirit of the question to pick a hand trap. Yes, I could say Infinite Impermanence. That's the trap card that I played the most, but it's not really a trap card now, is it? No, a trap card is supposed to be something that you lay down, something that you wait for your opponent to walk into and then punish them for something. So I went back to Duel Links. I am rejecting the TCG and the OCG for this question. Traps exist in Duel Links. Let's talk about it. So, in terms of traps in Duel Links, Warning Point's probably my favorite. It stops on-summon effects, it stops people from being able to use their monster as material, and in a 3-card board, that is very relevant. Some decks actually cannot function if they are not able to use every piece of their board for materials. If they have just a brick in the middle of their board, because Warning Point is essentially the same thing as just doing Ojama King to that square. You basically made that card worthless. There are some decks that can use a monster without tributing or using it as material, like monsters that can tribute another monster, for example. But for the most part, you're basically locking your opponent to 2 zones for the rest of their turn. That is valuable. And then, of course, you can use it on multiple monsters as well. So this kills Pendulum decks and other things like that. A very strong card, very fun card. I really enjoy it a lot. My favorite archetype is Speedroids. What can I say about this? I like Speedroids because they are very combo oriented. It feels like every piece of my hand is just part of a larger game plan, and none of the cards in my deck feel like they're irrelevant. I'm always looking for a way to go into the next piece of the combo. When I can get 3 big negates out at the end of the turn off of 1 or 2 cards, it feels great. It's exciting. You get an actual rush playing Speedroids if you're good at it. Bane of My Existence. Okay, this one's going to be unpopular, but I do not like Super Polymerization. I have played Super Polymerization. I have reached King of Games with the Hero Alliance version of Elemental Heroes, but Super Polymerization is just such a toxic card that violates so many rules of the game. I really wish that this card existed in a different way because it's so polarizing. Part of the reason I don't like this card is because its removal, but it seems very odd to me that there's not a positive version of this. Like, why do we have only a spell speed 4 that takes monsters from both fields? That seems really powerful. Why is there not like an in-between where there's like a polymerization that is spell speed 4 but only for your cards? Does that not strike anyone else as weird? Like, why is it that if you want to be able to fusion someone without your opponent responding, you have to play the version that takes their shit, as opposed to just polite super poly that might, maybe you don't have to discard a card, you can use cards from your hand, but only your cards, right? Seems so weird that we just skipped straight to this. But it affects cards that can't be targeted, it doesn't destroy them, it sends them to the graveyard. It can't be responded to, and it's just a huge form of removal. This card has single-handedly made cards like Starving Venom Fusion Dragon intolerable, and I just don't. I feel like the game is better when there is more back and forth between players. I do not like the idea of spell speed 4s. I like spell speed 3s because that encourages people to play traps. I think that we need more counter traps that are viable, because if the more counter traps that are played, the more people feel pressured to play trap cards, because counter traps can only be responded to by other counter traps. And if we got it to a point in the game where counter traps were powerful enough that people felt the need to run 7 Tools of the Bandit in the same way they feel the need to run Ash Blossom, that would be a healthier format, in my opinion. But this is not the right way to do that. A card that can only be responded to by certain cards is good, because it encourages a diverse gameplay. A card that cannot be responded to at all is not good. That doesn't change anything about the way people play the game. It just punishes them if they happen to play dark monsters, or if they happen to play 2 monsters of the same type, or if they happen to not remove your face down before they go into the battle phase, that sort of thing. This card could be toned down in so many ways that would make it a healthy and interesting card without being so dangerous. For example, one of the easiest ways to do this, maybe it could be spell speed 4, but does it have to be a quick play spell? Why can't this card just be limited to your turn, your main phase? Okay, I activate this card. Okay, now you don't get to respond, but I didn't get to use it during your battle phase and steal all your stuff mid-attack. No. I was able to, play Super Polymerization, get my fusion monster, begin my turn without any interruption from you, but I didn't have to do it on your... Like, it just seems like there's way too much going on this card. I would prefer if there was a version of Super Polymerization that I could run that was not so over the top and did not violate so many rules of how Yu-Gi-Oh! Is supposed to work. But there's not. This is it. So, just not my thing. Okay, and that was the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching. This is Serafi. I was thrilled to have you all with me.